wonder what kind of a guitar I should make next. I'd like to do something I haven't done in a while. Something that would be a challenge. I know. How about a bass? Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars. Welcome back to my channel. You know, recently I've been involved in a guitar project which has taken a considerable amount of my time, and unfortunately I can't share that project with you just yet. Perhaps down the road I can share it with you and let you in on the project I've been working on. In fact, it's hidden right behind that little black sheet there. But what I've decided to do in order to keep things interesting here on my YouTube channel is I'm going to start another build that's going to happen in tandem with the secret project that I'm working on. And what I'll do is I will take you along on this project, and I'll probably take several episodes of my videos to cover the whole build. But what I'm going to do today in this episode is kind of bring you along to explain the project itself, the design, and how it's coming together. And then from there I'll move on through the actual construction process. So to begin with, we're going to go jump on the computer and we're going to start to look at how this design is going to come together. So let's get started. I've always had an affinity for the Fender Precision Bass. In my opinion, it's the best bass guitar design ever made. And in particular, I'm partial to the 1951 model, which was the first year it was introduced. And of course, over the years, the Precision Bass has been slightly tweaked in its design, and I think Fender was just looking for ways to improve the design for its customers, as well as to make the guitar easier for them to manufacture. But I wanted to go ahead and make something that was similar to the 1951 Precision Bass. However, my intention is not to copy that guitar exactly. Instead, I think what I want to do is build a bass that's going to be inspired by the 51 Precision. Because whenever I build a guitar, whether it's a bass guitar or a 6-string or 7-string or whatever, I typically will include a lot of my own design tastes, my own philosophies, my own style, my own techniques, my own flair, whatever you want to call it. And it will end up deviating slightly from the original intention. So what I have here on the screen is a full-size, full-scale body plan. Now, I didn't create this. I actually found this on the Telecaster Guitar Forum, and I downloaded it. It's specifically for a precision bass. And looking at that upper left corner where it says AV62, I'm guessing that this was based on a 62 precision bass design. At any rate, it was full size, it was full scale, and it was free. So I thought, okay, this will be a good basis for creating this guitar that I want to build. Now, the problem I ran into is I couldn't find a full size, full scale drawing of a precision bass neck, specifically from that early 1951 time frame, which was okay because I can create my own neck. But what I decided to do right off the bat is I wanted to create a template that I could lay out this guitar full size, full scale in Adobe Illustrator. So I found a neck, and this was just an image that I found online. And it's actually a pretty close rendering of the 51 Precision Bass. The headstock is correct, the body is correct, the control cavity is how it was originally designed, the pickup cavity, everything on this is correct. But I couldn't find an actual plan that I could download. And perhaps someone will recognize this and know where you can purchase this plan from, because I couldn't find anything that was free to download. And I would assume that whoever created this has it up for sale, but you know, like I said, I couldn't find anything. So I realized that I would just use the neck as a template. And so what I ended up doing was I brought that into Illustrator and I created a template using this body plan and then that neck plan. And this is what I create. This is full size, full scale, and this is just going to be a template. That's why it's presented in a very light pink color so that it won't be too obtrusive when I created the design for the guitar itself. And what I ended up with is my own version of this, which is what you see here in black. And this is the entire guitar. It includes the pick guard, the full neck, the headstock, and then I dropped in the bridge that I plan to use and the tuners that I'm going to use. This is a hip shot kick-ass bridge, and then these are hip shot half-inch bass tuners with the Y-shaped pegs. So this is what I am planning to use for building my files, my template files, or in my case, the template file is actually a G-code file to run my CNC machine, and that's what I'm going to be doing. But by doing this full-size, full-scale, top-down view, I could lay out everything and make sure everything was going to work. I wanted to make sure that the neck was going to be the right width and taper. I wanted to make sure that the strings were going to be at a specific distance from the edge of the fretboard. And I actually talked about it, that subject in a previous video. And I'll put a link in the upper right corner right here to that video if you want to go back and check out. It's all about how I design the nut before I design anything else, which is how I came up with this. But one thing I did notice as I was laying this out, I was able to go with a neck that's going to be slightly narrower than the Fender version. So I had to reshape the pocket on the body for that neck. And then, of course, since I'm reshaping the pocket, I had to reshape the pick guard to fit with that pocket design. And I'm going to have a truss rod that is adjusted at the heel. And one thing I've never liked about the Precision Bass is the heel access at the pick guard for that truss rod slot is somewhat restrictive. So I've enlarged it just a small amount because I have plenty of space to do that. And I want to be able to easily slide a tool in there, an Allen wrench to adjust the truss rod. So I modified that a little bit. I also modified the control cavity, as you can see here, kind of this banana shaped thing. If you look at a lot of the templates and plans for, or even just unfinished bodies, you'll notice that quite a few of them have the control cavity integrated with the pickup cavity. And that's something that Fender did just to simplify and speed up the process of production. So I went along with the same approach. The one thing I did differently, though, as I was laying out the pick guard, I decided I wanted to position the screws a little more consistently around the perimeter. And one thing I've noticed when you shop for Precision Bass pick guards, replacement pick guards, is they have holes all over them, or at least some of them do. And that's because they're making pick guards that will fit all the different mounting arrangements that were possible with all the different precision basses that have been made over the years. So I decided just to clean that up. Since I'm going to make my own pick guard, I might as well set it up to where the mounting holes are going to be arranged a little bit more attractively around the perimeter. And then that also allowed me to create the bumps here in the control cavity where the screws will be mounted. So it just makes it a little cleaner and a little bit more efficient for the installation of the pickguard. Now, another thing I did was, because I'm going with a slightly narrower neck here, is I had to change the arrangement of the screws that will mount the neck to the body. So I can't use a traditional Fender neck plate when I attach the neck with the wood screws. So what I decided to do instead was to use neck ferrules, neck mounting ferrules, those round, thick washer looking things that you can use instead of a plate. And I think that will make for a cleaner, nicer look for that, the way the neck is going to be mounted into the body. And I've done this many times before, and I actually prefer it over a neck plate. I've always thought a neck plate looks like sort of a afterthought, but in this case, I'll use the ferrules recessed down into the body. So I had to lay out this area here. Now, the headstock illustrates another reason why I had to do some revisions to the design. If you look at the original layout here, this is the shape of the headstock in here, but I found that when I decided to go with these hip shot tuners, if you look really closely here, you'll notice that this red line at an angle here going across the peg heads here, the buttons, is crossing right over the edge of it. And I felt there was going to be, that the clearance was going to be too little. And I wanted to have a little bit more clearance between the machine head, between the tuner's peg and the edge of the headstock. So I had to reshape the headstock in order to accomplish that. And so the headstock is a little bit more, it's a little leaner looking, a little thinner, a little bit more narrow. So, but I like it. I think it looks kind of cool this way. So, but that's just another example of how I'm going to change this whole guitar to suit my specific requirements. And so it really isn't, you can't call it a Fender Precision Bass anymore. You can only say that it's inspired by the Fender Precision Bass. Now, once I had this layout done and I was happy with how everything was going to work, I broke it out into separate pieces. I had to create a file for the body, the neck, the fretboard, the the pickguard. So what I did was I created a file for the body, and then this is for the neck, and you can see here off the drawing space I've got a side view of it, and I do that to kind of check the clearances and the distances and things like that. So when I build this as a 3D file, I know I have a reference to go to in terms of thickness and stuff like that. And then I've got a layout for the fretboard, and that includes the marker dots, and then at the top here you can see where I've got a little template for the radius. And all these elements will be imported into Rhinoceros 3D to build my 3D models. Let's see, next we had, of course, the pickguard. So what I had to do, we'll go back here to the body, is I had to look at each of these files and decide what is going to be a 3D carving and what is going to be a 2D carving. Because everything that's going to be 3D, I'm going to set that up as a 3D model in Rhinoceros, and then I'm going to bring that into MeshCAM to create my tool paths and write my G-code. However, everything that's going to be two-dimensional carving, I can just set that up in Easel, and to do that I would save out the appropriate elements as SVG files. So what I could do then is, once I've made that decision, is I could go back in and build my 3D models of all the parts that I need for those 3D models. And what I created is these four models you see here on the screen. On the upper left I've got the neck, and that is full size, full scale, three-dimensional rendering of the neck. And I have the fretboard down here, same thing. But you'll notice there are no slots in it. That's because slots are two-dimensional, so I don't need to incorporate those into the 3D model. I just need the radius and that little curvature at the front, just in front of the nut. And then up here we have the body. But you'll notice a couple of things. There is no pickups and control cavity pocket or a neck pocket. Again, those are two-dimensional carvings. So what I'm using this for is to create the 3D tool paths and G-code for this arm contour and the belly relief. So that's really all I'm going to be using this for. But once I have these elements, I can then quickly build a 3D model, which you see in the lower right corner, and that has all the pieces put together. And this is a great tool for ensuring that everything is going to fit properly and that I'm not going to have any issues that could come up down the road. I can actually resolve problems now. I can actually determine the depth of my neck pocket at this stage before I do anything else. Normally I determine the neck pocket after I've fully finished carving the neck. Then I'll go back in and measure the thickness of the neck. That's something I'll explain a little bit more in detail as I progress with this build. So stay tuned for that, because that's good information for those of you who are wondering what is the best way to determine accurately the depth of your neck pocket before you start to carve it. I know a lot of folks tend to use the default measurements that are specified either by Fender or Gibson or whoever else, and that's not always correct, and it can lead to a lot of problems. So in a future episode, I'll go over that in a little bit more detail. Once I had all my 3D models created, I saved each one as a .stl file, which is stereolithograph, for those of you who are curious about those sort of file extensions. But once I had done that, I was able to import those into MeshCAM. And this is an example. This is the neck, and I'm just going to show you the neck here. This is clearly involves a lot of 3D carving, especially with this contour. And MeshCAM works fairly well at creating tool paths for this type of surface. So that's where I use the 3D carving operations. It's anywhere, any surface that's going to be rounded or angular, because Easel Pro, which I'll be jumping into here in a second, really isn't designed for that at the moment. Although a little birdie has told me that they're working on it. So it may be possible in the future that Easel Pro could handle some of that 3D type carving, which would be awesome. At any rate, for that type of carving at this stage, at this time, I'm using MeshCAM to create the toolpaths. So here, I'll click Calculate, and I'll show you what the toolpath looks like. Okay, this is all the green is the movement of the spindle and the bit as it's carving out the surface. And there's 3 operations here. Typically with CNC, you always start with a rough carving operation to hog out most of the wood and get it out of the way. And then from there you would do a finishing type operation. And there's multiple different types of finishing operations you can do. But this will clean up the surface, because in the rough carving operation, it tends to be pretty rough in terms of a stair-step effect. And to clean that up and to smooth out the surface, that's what the parallel finish is. That's what that accomplishes. And then I use this pencil finish, which is just a cutout. It goes around the perimeter. And that really, what that does is it puts a nice finish on surfaces that are absolutely vertical, which would be the edges of my headstock, the inside of the tuner holes, and around the rear heel of the neck. Okay, so once that's done, and I've created all my different G-code files, the next step is to bring those into my Easel Pro, which is what you see here. And Easel Pro is, it's basically Inventable's CAD/CAM solution, which works with not only their CNC machines, the original X-Carve, the X-Carve Pro, but it also works with just about any other Arduino Gerbil-based CNC machine, which are becoming really popular these days. So I like this program because I can keep everything nicely arranged and organized in here. And this includes all of my two-dimensional carving operations, which I can set up by importing SVG files directly into Easel, which is what you see here on this first file. This is the marker dots on the fretboard, as well as the slot for the nut. top view here on the left side of the page. But I can drop this in as an SVG file that I save directly out of Illustrator. And then I can select my bits, and I've got a whole range of different bits that I can choose from. And I can also establish my settings for carving depending on the bit. And I also can import my G-code files. Now remember I showed you the neck earlier in both Rhinoceros 3D as well as MeshCAM. And this is how that file imports into Easel. So all the blue lines, this is the rough carve for the back of the neck, the headstock, and the heel. And the blue lines indicate the movement of the router and the bit. And so that's kind of how that works. So I can use Easel not only to set up files to cut, but I can also import the G-code. And then all these files can be sent to my CNC machine to carve. And if you look at the bottom of the page, there are all these different pages that I've created for this project. So the very first one is the marker dots and the slot for the nut. The next one is the slots for the frets. Then I've got this is that G-code file for the radius of my fretboard. Then I have a simple operation for cutting the perimeter of the fretboard after the radius is done. Then I can move over to the neck, and this file represents the truss rod slot. And this is just a simple SVG file that I brought in, and then I established the depths for each part of the slot. So it makes it incredibly simple, and it's easy. You can view the preview over on the right side of the page to see what it's going to look like after it's been carved into a slab of, this will be maple. Hopefully I can fine grain that straight. And then I can move on to another imported G-code file, and this is for the front of the headstock. And you can kind of see the shape there. This is both a rough carve and a finish carve in one single operation. Once I'm done with that, I can then flip that blank over. And again, this is something I'm going to talk about in a future episode in this series, where I will explain how I register two-sided carving for my necks and bodies. It's so brutally simple that I think a lot of you will be kind of surprised. And some of you will even wonder, does that really work? And it does. At any rate, I'll flip the blank for the neck after I finish carving the front of the headstock. And the first operation to be done here is to drill the holes in the back of the neck at the heel to mount the neck into the guitar. So I've got that set up here. Then I can proceed with carving the actual shape of the neck. So this is the rough carve, and again, all the blue lines show the movement of the router as it's carving. The red lines are the rapid moves in between carving specific sections. So that's what those are. And then once the rough carve is finished, the spindle will return to the start position. And then if I want to, for this particular operation, I'm going to change the bit from a straight end mill to a round nose bit. So that's what I'll use for the next carve, which is the finish carve. And this is going to smooth out the surface, that rough stair-step surface that was left by the rough carve. And this will leave it incredibly smooth. It should be so smooth that I can proceed with sanding using 220 grit sandpaper. I don't have to start out with a coarser grit. And then once that's done, I'm going to do that perimeter cut, which is going to clean up the very edge of all the perfectly vertical surfaces like the headstock, the heel, and the tuner holes. Now once that's done, I'll remove the blank. I'll cut the tabs that held the neck into the blank so I can liberate the neck from the blank. It's kind of like when you build a plastic car model, you have to clip the pieces off the sprues. It's kind of the same thing. Once I do that, I can liberate the neck, I can do a little bit of sanding, I can install the truss rod, and then glue the fretboard on. So then, and from there I can then install the frets if I want to, and at that stage, the neck is pretty much done. So I can move on to the body. And the first operation in the body is to drill the holes for mounting the neck into the body. And as you can see here, this operation is going to drill a hole down into the pocket as well as a larger hole for the recessed ferrules that I'm going to use to install this neck. Once that's done, I'll switch bits and I will start with carving the back. And this is all I'm going to do at this stage is just carve the belly relief here. And this is a rough carve. And once that's done, I'll switch bits to a round nose and I'll do the finishing pass here. And this is a pretty complex carve. The finish carve is going to carve along the y-axis and then on the x-axis to get a really, really smooth surface. So once that's done, there's nothing else on the back to carve, so I can flip the body over. And this may be kind of hard to see on the screen. You'd have to enlarge it. But what I'm going to be doing here is drilling the holes to mount the pick guard. And that's done with a very small 16th inch diameter bit. And they'll be drilled about a ½ inch down into the blank. But once that's done, I can then move on to the next carve, which in this case is the beginning of the neck pocket as well as the pickup and control cavity pocket. And what I typically do here is I will start this carve using a 1/4 inch down cut spiral bit. And the reason I do that is because the down cut bit will cut a nice clean surface without the fuzzies and tearaway. But it doesn't do a really good job of digging all the way deep down into the body for the full depth of the pocket. So once I've cut about a 1/4 inch around the perimeter, the spindle will return to home and shut off, and I can switch the bits to a spiral upcut bit, same diameter, and then that's what I'll use to cut this operation, which finishes out those pockets. And then once that's done, I can proceed with my body. This is the perimeter shape as well as that forearm contour. So I'll do the rough cut here, follow it up with just a quick parallel finish on both the X and Y axis here to get that surface of that arm relief really, really smooth. And then once that's done, I'll switch back to a regular end mill and I'll cut my perimeter, which will really clean up those vertical sides of the guitar all the way around, make them nice and smooth. And then once that's done, it's the pick guard. And in this operation here on this page, I'm going to be drilling the holes to mount it, as well as the hole for the controls, the pickups, and the around the neck. And I have another file here. This looks somewhat similar to the previous one, but without the pickup pocket or the neck pocket. But what this is a beveled chamfer around each of the mounting holes so that the screws will fit nice and flush into the pickguard. And then last but not least, I have my contour of the pickguard, and this is going to be done with I think it's a 90-degree V-bit, and it will carve all the way around and leave a nice beveled edge all the way around the perimeter of the pickguard. So that's basically the whole carving operation in Easel. So what's the end game here? Well, the guitar body is going to be painted a gloss white. The neck is going to be natural maple. I'm not sure if I'm going to clear coat it or not. We'll decide about that a little bit later. I may just clear coat the fretboard just to protect it. When I paint the body, I'm going to make my own paint, and it's going to be a water-based 2K polyurethane, products from Centurion. That's products that I've been using lately and have had great luck with. All the hardware, the bridge, the tuners, the knobs, the ferrules, the neck bolts, the pick guard, and all the mounting screws, everything is going to be black. So kind of a cool look to it, I think. At any rate, more about that as we get closer to it. So I would encourage you to, if you like watching videos on building guitars, to follow this series. And what I plan to do is I'm going to create a playlist for this series. And that way you can reference just the videos that were shot for this particular build. And I'll post a link probably down in the description of each video, as well as at the end of each video. And I'll probably post something up here so that you can find that playlist easily. And we'll see where this project goes, and we'll see how long it takes. The next step, which is what I'm doing right now, is first of all, I had to take inventory of what parts I had on hand, which, as it turns out, I had quite a few, but there are several parts, the bridge and the tuners, which I did not have on hand in the finish that I want, so I've ordered those. I had to order a much longer truss rod since this is going to be a 34-inch scale length. And I decided to get a different size fret wire. I'm going with a 103 wide, 57 tall, or 55 tall. So pretty much a jumbo, somewhere between a medium and a super jumbo, I guess. Depends. Jumbo is one of those terms. Remember when I was talking about terms that drive me crazy? Well, describing frets with words drives me crazy because you've got to use the numbers. Because one man's jumbo is another man's normal or narrow or whatever. So the words just don't do it. But at any rate, as soon as I get all the parts in, and that includes the wood, I have to go out and source the wood. And I may actually do an episode on purchasing the wood. It just depends. I don't like to film on locations where I'm purchasing my wood. I'm just not too into that. But at the same time, I don't know really what the supply is going to be like. The last couple of times I checked with local suppliers, the availability of the type of wood that I use for guitars is pretty skinny. So we'll see what happens. I'm hoping I can just pop in and grab a nice piece of maple for the neck and fretboard and possibly a slab of alder for the body. We'll see. But at any rate, hope you like this episode. As always, click like, comment, hit the subscribe button if you don't already subscribe. If you want to show the channel support, you know the drill. Head over to eguitarplans.com and purchase a plan. And even if you don't use the plan or build it, you'll be helping to support this channel and keep it going. And for that, I really appreciate. If you want to support the channel but don't want a plan, you can also purchase a t-shirt. I've got a little merch shelf down below with a few designs that I've created. Who knows, maybe one day I'll add some more to it if I can find the time. At any rate, if you don't see that merch shelf, there is a link in the description below. So, as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.